Hey everybody, it is Trags Mike Petralia. Welcome to the latest episode of the JungleRoar podcast, powered by our friends at Prize Picks and the Game Time app, and of course, our great people at CLNS Media. Rejoining me this week, it's been a little bit, probably a little more than, I guess, I don't know, 2-3 months, Paul, since Paul Dehner Jr. has been on the JungleRoar podcast. How long has it been, Paul?
I don't know. It's however long it takes for me to secretly harbor animosity and anger as I stew, wondering where my invitation is and having to see all these other people pop up and think, well, did I say something wrong? Do you think that I suck now? Like, I don't know what's happened here, but I'm happy to be here. But yeah, I'm mostly mad that it's been so long, but I'm still here and I'm ready to do it.
I will try not to be disgusted like I was in the elevator going down to the post-game Sunday night. Okay, let's get this out of the way first. As you told me just before I hit record on this podcast, one of your goals in your professional career is never become a meme.
Yeah.
And James Rapine took a picture of us waiting to get down on a very hot, crowded elevator as the game was ending Sunday night. Bengals just went up 17-7 on the Chase Brown touchdown. And we're all crammed into this elevator. And the lady operating the elevator tells us, this is not for the media, sir. This is not for... We get on regardless and disregard her and say, look, we need to get downstairs because the other two elevators weren't ready. You were ready. Just get us downstairs. Of course, we get the local. It stops on every floor of MetLife Stadium. And then you get some fans on in there. And James decides to take a picture, a selfie, James Rapine. And you look joyous. You look like you couldn't be happier to be going down to do your job. Me, on the other hand, I look like I normally am around people in a crowded space. People in general, but especially people in a crowded space. I look disgusted. So for anybody who's wondering, head to the James Rapine X feed, and you can certainly find it there. Head to my feed for that matter. I retweeted it with some type of witty commentary. But anyway, that's what it was like. But we could all be goofy. We could all be happy on Sunday night. Happy is, I don't know if that's the right word, but certainly for the Bengals, they were relieved after that 17-7 victory over the New York Giants. Certainly not a thing of beauty, but something they needed to get done. It was never going to be a pretty game. I didn't think it was going to be a pretty game going in. And they got the win. And I think the most important, and I talked to Skinny about this on our post-game pod Sunday night, the most important part of that game was the Bengals won a game in which Joe Burrow wasn't very good, especially in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, that game looked like a lot of Giants games have looked this year. I mean, the Giants haven't given up more than 21 points to another opposing offense all season. And so that's the game the Giants play. When you have Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns right now at peak Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns, like they do things like that to people. And they certainly had the Bengals looking disjointed and clunky and offensively not the group that you'd seen in previous weeks. But that's part of how you beat the Giants, is by taking advantage in other ways. And they did. And that to me was the biggest thing, was the fact that they went out and won a game with their defense, built confidence in that area, and specifically built confidence in a lot of young players. So many young players, I thought, had important steps, made plays that they really needed them to make in this game. And that stood out to me because I think this season, Trags, when we're sitting in January, whether we're talking about a playoff game or we're talking about a rebuild, whatever it is, we're going to be talking about the development of these young players, these last few draft classes. The season has hinged on it. We know Burrow and T and Jamar are going to give this team a chance every night. Whether they can be the type of team they want to be is going to be whether these young players that they are so much counting on and giving big and big, now even bigger roles to, continue to develop. And I thought that was a big night for them on Sunday when you saw, Jordan Battle got extra reps. You saw DJ Turner with the game-changing, altering, deciding PBU. You saw even McKinley Jackson getting extra run and looking like a little bit, he could give you a little bit of juice. Chase Brown on offense, Andre Yosivas with the big play, like all of these guys continuing to grow and progress is how you have a team that has kind of looked the way it looked through the first 5-6 weeks that can look like the one that they want it to look like, one that can go win a Super Bowl in January. That's what we're going to be talking about. And it was a big takeaway for me from this game of, man, look at so many young players taking a little bit of a step, building a little bit bigger role. And here they go to try to keep that going and have that confidence grow even more for them.
Now, obviously, Kayvon Thibodeau wasn't available, but I thought the Bengals tackles on Sunday night played pretty well. Orlando Brown Jr. is quietly having his best year with the Bengals so far, and I don't know if you agree with this, but I think he's arguably having a Pro Bowl caliber season. Amarius Mims, he came back from the injury that he sustained late in the Baltimore game, and he started. I thought he looked very solid. The tackles on the Bengals, especially to your point, Amarius Mims and being in his first year, I think they look pretty good, Paul.
Yeah, add Mims into the young player list, right? I mean, it's another guy who has felt like a solid part of it. I mean, he's had his issues, right? You have the cadence issue and a few schemes, the stunt pickup,
Typical
whatever,
rookie
like
stuff, right?
Typical rookie stuff. For the most part, though, asked to go out there and be a wall, has been a wall, and he's moved some people, and he certainly doesn't stick out right on that. And that's all you want. You have one rookie up there and a bunch of veterans, 4 guys that played next to each other last year and are all veterans with skins on the wall in this league now. And one rookie, he hasn't looked like 1 and 4. It's looked like 5 together. And he's felt like a solid part of their protection. And I thought the rewatch for me, Trags, was something that Zach Taylor sort of confirmed too, was that the offensive line issues didn't look like a bunch of one-on-one losses. It looked like a bunch of procedural, structural clunkiness, whether it was like the cadence stuff or some sort of communication or a bad call or play, something that just felt clunky. You didn't see a bunch of, oh man, he got manhandled from Ted Karras or even Dexter Lawrence doing that to them necessarily. I mean, they blew up the pocket and they found ways, but and there's issues for them to work out there. But I don't feel like you came away from that being like, ooh, this great Giants D line just kind of kept winning one-on-ones with them all night long. And that's encouraging because the Giants are gonna make people look bad all year long.
I know when we get the inactives 90 minutes before the game, we take notes on who's active, who's inactive, who's coming back from injury specifically. But on Sunday night, when you saw Jermaine Burton inactive for the first time in his rookie season, speculation catches on like wildfire. You know that, Paul. And all of us are wondering, did something happen during the week? You know, we did spot him eventually pregame during the stretch and during warmups. He was there in his hoodie. And then after the game, Zach Taylor said, don't read too much into it. This is a one-off. It's a situation where the game plan didn't call for him to be in the game. We needed his spot for others. Point blank, do you buy that from Zach?
No, I mean, not really. It's possible that it's true, but I think for the most part, he's not going to say, "Oh yeah, we saw whatever, some rookie, this, that, or the other." I don't think it's certainly possible, but I also think that they're still going through it probably with him, you know, and so I would say that there's as much of a chance as the other. I don't know that solves the riddle for me. I still have questions, and they've tried to keep him involved. And another thing that he talked about yesterday was trying to keep guys feeling a part of thing when they're younger players by having a couple of snaps and a sub package or whatever. And we've seen that with most of their young guys. And we've seen that with Burton, where they had, give him 3-4 snaps, throw the deep ball to him in Kansas City, have a few things that he does to keep him engaged. And, when you have somebody like that inactive, I don't know what the contingency plan would be for Trenton Irwin instead of him, unless we're talking about benching Charlie Jones as a punt returner or something. Like I don't. There's no real role that he necessarily fills where you couldn't have something that Burton could give you. So, yeah, I think it's fair to question it. I certainly don't think it solved anything hearing that, he says this about why he was inactive.
Well, and it could be as simple as the coaching staff and Zach didn't feel necessarily against this pass rush and this defensive front. That Burrow was going to have plenty of time to pick out his receivers, 2 or 3 receivers deep down the field, 20, 25 yards. And knowing that going into the game, they're like, well, why do we have Burton active if Joe is not going to have time to get the ball as far downfield as he needs to get it to, involve Burton in a game plan?
Yeah, Burton needs to have good weeks every week. He needs to be doing all the things they want him to do, whether it be in meetings or the playbook or in practice or in whatever, every week. And if he doesn't, then they're going to probably have to respond accordingly. I'm not saying that's the case, but you have to know that that's part of the growth pattern that they're planning for Burton this year and has been the case since, all the stuff that's kind of went on in preseason.
Are Zach Moss and Chase Brown sleeping with the football this week?
Oh, there's always that. That's like, you've covered college and high school and stuff back and it's like, that was always the thing, right? You get the high school kid that's walking through the hallways with the ball under his hand, right? Like
it's the first thing I think of when I see what happens to not one, but both of your running backs in key situations on Sunday night. Those could have been game-changing and costing plays.
The Zach Moss one was. They're going down to kind of go up 2 scores. They're in position, and you just give it to the other team, and it gives them the juice to go down and get their only touchdown of the game. I mean, it changed the entire dynamic of the game. And I mean, boy, they go through some games where some of the luck didn't go their way. Baltimore, Kansas City specifically, New England with the Tanner Hudson at the 2 going to put his arm up, fumble luck there, whatever, where some bounces, and it was kind of weird and unprecedented to only have 1 win considering how they had played. They get a little luck on that one because, man, that screenshot of the Giants guy right there to pick it up in a fumble in that spot, and what could have happened next at 10-7, man, that's one that you have to be thinking how differently it could have gone. And Chase Brown rides the roller coaster. It was actually insane what they did last year, only having 2 fumbles lost. The next lowest was 5 by any team, and they're already doubled that this year. Some of that stuff is just that. It's fumble luck, right?
Fumble luck.
There's very little correlative nature to fumbles year to year. They happen. That said, that was a Joe Mixon specialty. That was one of the things that you were losing when you shifted away from Joe Mixon to this type style and to new guys. Is Mixon's not a fumbler, man. He holds on to the ball, and that's proven over his entire career. That this can't be a thing that's consistent with them. They've had too many fumbles this year, lost and picked up. So I don't know if you go full high school style walking through the hallways with the football, but I do think once is fine. If you start to see a trend happen, you start to think about how playing time needs to change.
Okay. It was a fabulous play, one of the most athletic plays of Joe Burrow's career. But at the end of the play, at the very end of that 47-yard touchdown run, he does something that would not always be advisable, and that is dive for the pylon, exposing the ball, and there is the potential there. He could have fumbled that ball technically out of the back of the end zone, and that's a touchback. Zach was asked about that on Monday, I know, and I just want to get your thoughts on it. It's a great play. The Bengals needed that kick in the ass to get their night started, I think, in New York, just so that they weren't just going through the motions and feeling like, here we go again. That really rejuvenated the team. It was a terrific play. But your thoughts on Burrow diving for the pylon there?
So it's an interesting conversation. I've talked to people about this topic before, not about this instance. There are a lot of analytics that suggest reaching out for the goal line is far more advantageous in terms of your point potential than not, and that's actually something you should be doing more often, because the amount of times you actually get the touchback aren't as impactful as the times that you get the touchdown, that reaching for it rather than having to have, we know how much Zach Taylor in this offense loves being at like first and inches and first and one. We've seen those. They're tough yards to get, and they tend to be troubling. Or ask Baltimore Ravens from Fumble in the Jungle about that. Like there's value in reaching for it, and obviously nobody wants to see it go into the end zone. But there's been studies done on that do show like you're better off reaching for it, and that the few times that it goes into the touchback, well, it's debilitating. And I think everybody, I find very few people that like that rule, but it's still a rule. So I do think that that's part of it too. So I don't have a huge problem with it. I do think that going for it, would you rather, what would have happened if they would have had first and goal from the one? Would they have gotten it in? We don't know that for sure. If he wouldn't have reached because he was worried that it would have come out. There's lots of situations like that every game. I mean, so that's my feelings on it. I do think there's value in just going for it.
All right, let's move ahead and take a look at the opponent this week, an opponent that the Bengals over the last 5 years have had a miserable time with in Cleveland. The Cleveland Browns come in at 1-5. They're a mess. Deshaun Watson is a mess. He had decent numbers last week, but not really great. He's got 3 touchdowns, I believe, or five touchdowns and 3 interceptions so far this year. He's not really a threat to throw the ball down the field. The one guy you worry about when you play the Cleveland Browns, if you're the Bengals, is Myles Garrett. Going into this game, Paul, do you think the Bengals have a different type of game plan, or do you think that the Bengals roster is different this year and can account for Myles Garrett and what the Browns do to the Bengals better than in the last 4 years?
Yeah, they need a different plan. I mean, the one that they've been trying to execute for a while has not really worked. I mean, no team has more been just in the head of the Bengals. I mean, to the point that there was credit given to the Patriots because Alex Van Pelt was in Cleveland before in week 1. Like, correct. That's how much they've sort of been in the Bengals' head. So, yeah, I think that there's probably new elements. Now, they are built differently this year. I think the 12 personnel stuff can really be advantageous, where they can have lots of stuff where you assure a tight end is lined up in front of Myles Garrett and you're getting a chip on him every single play and then getting out into the route. And somebody like Eric All, hopefully not like what they had Mike Gesicki trying to do against Brian Burns. And so I think that they are built a little bit better for it. And that's good for them. And Orlando Brown's playing better. Nobody's prepared to face Myles Garrett. Like, good luck to anybody. I don't care who you are, how good you're playing. So his plate's full this week. But that said, they have to do some things differently against this Browns defense that has kind of had a lot of ways to mess with them over the years. Of course, they didn't really get a chance to see them with the full complement of Burrow last year, as he was very hampered by his calf. And so maybe he gets his first win in Cleveland. We shall see. You can't be better set up. I mean, there's just no term to properly, talk about with dumpster fire, just, whatever you want to use. It's as Clevelandy as it gets up there right now, because the Browns have just somehow found a way to make their quarterback situation, which used to just be defined by the jersey with all the names on it, laughable with the one name that remains on it at this point.
Yeah, I think it was Chris Canty of ESPN said the window has been slammed shut on the Cleveland Browns. And it's really hard to disagree with that, the way their roster is put together. It was built around a player, that Deshaun Watson, who simply can't lead his team to victory and is a shell of what he was in Houston. When you look at Deshaun, Paul, what is so different about his days in Houston versus his days here in Cleveland?
Confidence, decision-making. He doesn't feel like when you watch him, it just doesn't feel like he ever is really confident in what he's looking at out there. And he's just not making the throws on time.
Not to interrupt you. It's just such a remarkable drop-off. And I don't know if anybody from the time he was at Clemson to the time his first couple of years in Houston, and versus what he is, the way he is playing now, I don't know if anybody could have foreseen the dramatic fall off in his play.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was about system fit or whatever was going on with the type of offense he was asked to run in Houston versus what he's asked to do here now. Maybe he doesn't feel like it fits him. Maybe everything that happened to him and the time away changed him. And maybe who I don't know. All I know is the guy that's out there now is truly awful in every way and historically bad with stuff we haven't seen. I mean, they can't convert a first down on third. They can't get a third down conversion. I mean, they can't do it. Like what, one in the last 26 or something like that. I mean, whatever. They can't. There's just nothing that they can do to drop back the pass. They can't score more than 20 points in a game. Haven't done that yet. And it all comes back to, look, we watched Joe Flacco in this offense last year tear it up and lead them to a playoff berth. I mean, it's just unbelievable when you look at essentially so many of the same pieces. And I think he's hurt by, the loss of Bill Callahan, able to keep that line intact no matter how many injuries or things they sustained. They miss that as he's with his son now in Tennessee, and they miss a more solid line in front of him. But I mean, it's on him. And so I don't know. And I'm sure they're sitting there saying, all right, get right game for Deshaun against this bad Bengals defense. And maybe that will be the case, but boy, it's bad.
Let's go back to Myles Garrett real quick. And I feel like when I read off these splits lifetime against the Cincinnati Bengals, I feel like it is reading offensive splits for Lamar Jackson, who is now 9-1 in 10 career starts against the Bengals. Myles Garrett in 10 career games against the Bengals is 8-2, meaning his teams have gone 8-2 against the Bengals. He has 12 sacks, 21 solos, total of 27 combined tackles, 10 tackles for losses, 25 quarterback hits. Now, to put that in perspective, the 25 quarterback hits is 6 more than the closest, and that would be against Pittsburgh, which is obviously understandable, another division team, and then 15 against Baltimore. The numbers are astronomical, Paul, and I'm just wondering, do the Bengals try to make it through this game and say, look, Myles Garrett is going to get his, we just got to do other things to counter it?
I don't think you say Myles Garrett's going to get his.
I mean, I guess the reason here's the reason I say that. Okay, that sounds ridiculous. I understand that, but at some point you've got to put your best Orlando Brown against him when maybe they switch him. They swap him over to the left defensive end against Amarius Mims. Who knows? But wherever you put Myles Garrett, you have to understand he's going to do what he's going to do. And yeah, maybe you double team him, but you can't let others along that defensive line eat you alive, is I guess my point.
Yeah, I think that, we just kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, and it connects, is, you didn't feel like, even as good as that Giants defensive line was, you didn't feel like they were really getting overwhelmed in one-on-ones. Myles Garrett will overwhelm everybody in one-on-one. So to me, I am constantly finding, that's the hard part about him. They move him around so much, is that you can't just, going to keep the chip on this side, the tight on that side. You've got to be, Joe needs to be tracking where Myles Garrett is, and I'm sure he is, on every snap, and trying to align the double, or whether it's, moving the running back into the hole where he is, or a tight end to that side, and keeping an eye on that protection scheme all day long, and then trusting the rest of the guys can win their one-on-ones and not get dominated. So to me, I would just try to not let Myles Garrett wreck shop. He's going to probably, but I don't know that I can live in a world where I just let Orlando Brown try to stop him solo. I don't feel like that's going to win often enough.
That's fair enough. Look, Myles Garrett, I just think he is going to get his on. I keep going back to that because I honestly believe that. Like, I don't think you stop Myles Garrett is my point. That's the
No,
gist.
I don't think even no matter what they do, they're going to stop
Right.
Myles Garrett. He's going to make plays. They just have to find other ways to, still get their points and not have it wreck their entire game plan. Yeah, you're right.
And we talked about this earlier, Paul. I think they are better situated to attack the Browns with their 12 personnel, with a running game. I just think it'll be interesting to me in a game like this. How much do they stick to the run game, even when the runs are, let's say, 2, 3, 4 yards a clip for, let's say, most of the first half? Do you stick with that? Obviously, the score is going to dictate some of that as well, obviously. But do you stick with that and just say, look, we've got to ground it out against them just to give our offensive line a chance to, wear down the Browns' defensive front?
I think you've got to be willing to try that. I don't know that I'm sticking with it though. I'm just sticking with whatever works. Another part of why the Browns I think have given them trouble is not just they're built to stop good passing games. I mean, they have sticky corners that play good man against good receivers. I mean, they've been able to give Jamar and T fits in one-on-one, and so those guys are just not winning matchups out there all day because they have really good cover corners. They have the rushers, and maybe they give up a little bit on the run sometimes. And JOK is a big time playmaker for them, who does a lot in the passing game too, in pass rush game. So I just, to me, I think you got to be willing to do that. But anything you can find to move the ball, if it's thrown to the tight ends like the Kansas City game plan, then you lean into that. Maybe that's where you feel like there's an advantage. I don't think you suddenly become some power run game. I think they're going to continue to be who they are. I mean, they lead the league in neutral pass rate, as they usually are up in the top couple every single year. You expect that to continue. Maybe there's a slight tweak of that plan, like I said, with tight ends or checkdowns to running backs that you can use to offset it. I'd be surprised if they suddenly try to just pound it on them. But if you have success early and you get some of these explosives that they've been getting, then I think you got to be willing to keep doing that. But you still are going to let Joe Burrow try to win you games.
I think, we'll wrap up on this, Paul. I think the Bengals are in a part of their schedule where they could actually revive their season. They were 1-4. They beat the Giants. Now you have the Browns, the Eagles at home, the Raiders at home. There is a world where they are 5-4 going into a rematch against Baltimore. The players are never, and the coaches obviously aren't going to publicly say that. But, we in the media, fans, I think, can look at the schedule, look at the optics, and see a scenario where if they take care of business over the next 3 weeks against teams that, against at least 2 of which they'll be favored against. I would think they'd be favored, depending on the Eagles being at Paycor and how the game turns out this week. They might be favored in all 3 of those games. If they take care of business, the Bengals season will be revived.
Yeah, and I think that's been kind of, I wrote last week about how I know nobody wanted to hear this, but like the defense will get better just by the nature of the teams that they're playing. Like they don't play anymore Baltimore's and Washington's and Patrick Mahomes. They play Daniel Jones and Deshaun Watson and whatever the hell Vegas is throwing out there in a couple of weeks. And the struggling Eagles offense, hasn't been what they've wanted it to be. And Will Levis and Bo Nix, and like that's their schedule. Like that, they're teams that look like the Giants did. Okay. And even that was the Giants without Malik Neighbors. But I mean, that's why their defense can get better. And if the defense plays better, this offense is good enough that it's going to carry them to a bunch of wins. And that's what they have right now. They have opportunity in front of them. They've got to be able to prove that they can win in the North. Something that they didn't do last year in games that mattered. And so they've got a long way to go to do it. And there's no assurances that they can beat all those teams. They should be able to when you consider the talent that they have specifically on offense. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can see it, but you could have seen a lot of things. They've got to prove that they can be consistent week to week.
Yes.
And be the type of team that can put something that resembles complimentary football on and not have, a few high leverage plays that happened to bounce their way last week. They could very easily go the other way. I mean, it's not like it's been totally convincing. Every game has been close. Every game has been like that to the end. I think they could really use, a couple of games where it feels like they're gaining steam and can really knock an opponent out early, which is something that we've seen when they've gone on these runs the last couple of years.
Yep.
They've had a few games mid-season, not all of them, but a few of them where it was like boom, and they showed up and dominated an opponent that was not as good as them, that deserved to be dominated. And that's when you knew they could be the team that could grow into what they ended up being, making runs deep in the playoffs. They need those. They need those in these next couple of weeks. One or two of these needs to feel like a game where they come out and put it all together and dominate, and then you really can stack and grow confidence for a young team that needs that.
What do you got up on The Athletic, Paul?
So I'm diving into it'll be up soon here. I'm diving into 4 plays from Sunday's game that I think showed some trends that can happen going forward. A lot of stuff about these young players and some of the growing and developing roles that we're seeing for them. I'm here. Tyson Anderson told me yesterday that him and Ryan Rico are the LeBron James and Dwayne Wade of punting. Where the combination of the two of them together has been amazing. And so that I have a little
that's
bit
worth a read just by itself. Just in your description of that, I'm like, what?
And I have a stat to back that up too. So that'll be in there, and plenty more. Of course, Growler Podcast is up and in now. A new one from today, myself and Jay and Mo, and we talk more about that elevator photo, and people can pick who in that elevator they are.
Yeah, I know. Well, I literally know who I am. I know who you are. And here's to more elevator rides in the near future, Paul.
Absolutely.
You are the best.
In Cleveland on Sunday is ahead of us.
You are the best elevator riding teammate that I could possibly want. How's that?
Somebody has to offset your attitude with my attitude. So I'm here for it.
Your joyous attitude. All right. He's Paul Dehner Jr. Does an amazing job, as always, covering the Bengals and the NFL for The Athletic. Be sure to catch his Growler podcast, a very unique look at football and all things Cincinnati Bengals, wherever you download your favorite podcasts. My name, by the way, is Mike Petralia Trags. I want to thank you for downloading this episode of the JungleRoar podcast. It is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app and our great colleagues at CLNS Media. Until next week, keep that jungle roaring.